All right, and this week we have Julie Ma from the Massachusetts High Performance Computing Center. I think I got all the letters in that acronym correct.
Perfect.
And she is going to be talking a little bit about Ask.CI. So I will turn it over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm going to share my screen. Actually, before I do that, since we have a somewhat small group, can we get a quick sense of who's where you're all from? Can I just do a quick roll of who's here? So Alex Mora.
Hi, I'm from RMP in Brazil.
Oh, great. Brian Burkhardt.
Hi, I'm with OneNet in Oklahoma.
Jeffrey Lyric. Jennifer Oxenford. Oh, hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Julie. Jennifer Oxenford with Kimber in Pennsylvania.
And then someone named Jim-Skippy.
Yeah, that's Jim Warner from the University of California at Santa Cruz.
And CERN. Okay, well, that gives me a good idea of who we've got here so far, and thank you all for doing that. I will now share my screen again. So we're here today to talk a little bit about Ask.CI, the Q&A platform for research computing. And thank you very much, first of all, to Jason and to all of you for joining us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about this. So Ask.Cyberinfrastructureorg, also known as Ask.CI, is a Q&A platform that is public, searchable. It's based on a discourse platform. It's a joint project of the Northeast Cyberteam initiative, which is basically where it started. The Northeast Cyberteam initiative is a NSF-funded program, a 3-year program, to try and make research computing more available to researchers at small and medium-sized institutions in our region, primarily by making research computing facilitators more available to them, and finding a way to help them be available across institutional boundaries. But additionally, by providing tools and resources online so that researchers at these smaller institutions can find more information that they might not be able to find on campus. So originally this project was a project of the Northeast Cyberteam, but it quickly caught the attention of the campus champions. And I can say with great certainty that we would not have been able to launch it as quickly or had it take off as much without the tremendous support that we had of the campus champions. So we're very grateful for that. So we went through a process that I will talk about in a little bit, and launched the platform last year at PERC. And the name Ask.CI was actually part of a naming competition that we did at PERC last year. So it's a crowdsourced name for our crowdsourced platform. So the goals of Ask.CI are to build a Q&A platform to basically collect all of the knowledge and experience that others have experienced when researchers first encounter advanced computing. And it's not just first, but it really is often helpful when a researcher is using HPC resources for the first time to be able to find answers to frequently asked questions. I usually don't like to say frequently asked questions because none of these questions come up that frequently. They just come up frequently when a particular researcher is trying to use a particular set of tools in a cluster environment. So we're trying to aggregate all of that knowledge in a public place that is searchable and archived. And hopefully by having this information out in the public, promote self-service learning and encourage faster time to research, and generally help things move along quickly by having a lot of information that is currently behind firewalls at a lot of larger institutions. You know, the Q&A site at Harvard or Stanford has a wealth of information. Some of that would be perfectly great to put out in the public, and that's what we're trying to gather on Ask.CI. And our hope is to become the go-to resource for people that are trying to do research computing. So some of the key benefits, I might have touched on some of this previously, but a key goal is to reduce duplication of effort throughout the community. As I mentioned, many of the large institutions have this information behind their firewalls available to the researchers at their institution. But many of the people that are providing that information, so the CI engineers, the facilitators, the research computing groups at these campuses, are really swamped by having to answer these questions over and over. And sometimes they're running into a situation for the first time, but it's definitely been solved elsewhere. And so if we can reduce duplication of effort of all of our extremely overworked and overtaxed facilitators by sharing this knowledge, it will allow everybody to work on sort of the next level of questions and the more advanced topics. And so that's one benefit, and that's sort of throughout the community, small institutions, large institutions, everybody benefits from that. But secondly, having a resource out there for small and medium-sized institutions that don't have a research computing group makes it possible for researchers at those institutions to learn a little bit more, and sometimes just even find out where resources are available than they would have otherwise. And similarly for domain-centric communities of interest, I'll talk about one of those later in the talk. And the key benefit across the board is to create more collaboration in the global community and hopefully elevate the practice. So all this is based on a hypothesis that Q&A discipline with voting can be very effective in communities where there's deep expertise, but it's very widely distributed, and where the knowledge base and technologies change very rapidly. And this is basically research computing, that there's tremendously deep expertise, and there could be 2 people in the country that really know how to do a particular task. And so finding those people is hard, and then the technology changes rapidly, and so you have to have some way of ensuring that your content is currently is constantly up to date. And having a voting habit where people go through and they just quickly vote for what is the best answer to a particular question ensures that as time goes by, the best answer gets the most votes, and that will be the one that you see first. So all of that fits very well into what we face daily in research computing. So how did we get here? How did we end up on a discourse platform? Well, we started, so if you think about what I just said about questions, answers, voting, that all sounds very much like Stack Exchange. And that's actually where we started. So we, somewhat naively, a year and a half ago, embarked on the process of starting a Stack Exchange. And we learned very quickly that launching a Stack Exchange is a fairly complicated process. It's very well defined. You spend quite a bit of time actually defining what your site is and what your site isn't, because there are so many Stack Exchanges that the powers that be at Stack Exchange want to make sure that if you're launching a new site, that it has room in the universe of Stack Exchange. And we felt very sure that that was the case, because there aren't that many people that are doing research computing. And even for subject matter such as Linux, Unix, or Mathematica, where there are questions that sound like the same questions, the answers can be very different if you're operating in a cluster environment. And so we went through this process, and during the whole process of defining a Stack Exchange, you're not actually putting any content anywhere on Stack Exchange. So we wanted to stage content while we were going through the launch process with Stack Exchange. So we started staging our content on a discourse platform, because discourse has none of those requirements about definition. Basically, you can decide you want to create a discourse site, and it's not trivial, but it's also not as involved to bring it up. So we did that kind of in parallel with doing the Stack Exchange process. So about halfway through the process, while we were in a phase called commit, where we had aggregated a lot of content and we're continuing to do that, Stack Exchange changed their rules a little bit about how long you could be in this process. And they changed it basically from a year to 4 months. And we had exceeded that time, so we got kicked off of Stack Exchange. So then we had a decision to make: shall we do this again? Try again? We can relaunch again. Now we know so much more. Or should we do something else? And we decided that at where we were and ready to launch a Stack Exchange, but we had all this great content on our discourse site. So we decided to refine our staging site and make it into our real site, and that's what we launched at PERC. And currently we have over 300 contributors.
I think Julie may have gotten knocked off. So everybody just please be patient and we'll see if she can reconnect. I'll just do another audio check. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. Just acknowledge via chat or call out if you still can. Yep, okay. All right, looks like Julie may have reconnected. Can you hear me, Julie?
I can, and I am so sorry. How long ago was I trying to air?
About maybe about 2 minutes.
All right, I am very sorry about that. So I was in the process of talking about the Stack Exchange launch process. How did I get through that before?
Yeah, you were just saying something about how the rules had changed for Stack Exchange, and that caused you guys to reevaluate something.
All right, I truly apologize. I am still not able to get back on my laptop, so I will just talk to this, and hopefully it will all make sense to you. It's all text, so hopefully this will make sense, and I will share the presentation as soon as I can get back online. I'm not really sure what happened. So anyway, we decided that we were going to just refine our staging site because we had so much really great content aggregated there. And rather than relaunch on Stack Exchange, because in the process of doing the launch the first time, we decided that maybe our community wasn't really quite ready for the level of engagement that Stack Exchange was requesting. So we decided to refine our staging site, and we launched it at PERC. And we currently have nearly 300 contributors representing 240 institutions around the world. And it's been really quite gratifying to see how it's evolved over the last year. So one of the side benefits that we discovered by launching on Discourse rather than on Stack Exchange is that actually it might be a better platform for the type of Q&A that we have in this community anyway. Stack Exchange has very strict rules about the format of your questions, and they have to have one answer. And as I described earlier, because there are so many Stack Exchanges, they very narrowly define what you can and can't cover on your site. And there's quite a lot of attention to that. And so for research computing that tends to go across many domains and many different types of technologies, it's actually very challenging to stay within your lane on Stack Exchange. And so Discourse gives us more flexibility in terms of the types of questions we can ask, where we can ask questions that have one answer, and we can also ask questions that are more discussion topics. And it also gave us the flexibility to do something that we've been piloting recently, which are called sandboxes or locales. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. So I really wish that I could show this to you right now because I do want to go to the site. So a locale is a personalized, dedicated category for site-specific topics. So this is a subcategory on our main site, and hopefully I'll have my internet back by the time I want to show this to you on the actual site. But we have a main thread of topics, both Q&A topics and discussion topics. But now we are also able to add an institution-specific topic. So the first one, the first person that thought of doing this was one of our moderators who is from Stanford University. And she realized that there were questions and answers they would like to post that are still out in the public, and it would be complementary to what they have internally. But if they could encourage their users to start communicating with each other and answer each other's questions, that would be a really good way to augment what they were able to provide from research computing. So this is a category or a board that's maintained on Ask.CI. But if you go to that particular board, it looks like it's a board for the particular institution. So currently we have one for Harvard, Stanford, Colorado Mines, Brown University. And one that's really been very interesting is a domain-oriented one called ResearchSoc, which is for a cybersecurity domain community of interest. And they're all experimenting with this idea of having questions and answers on our site, but at a subcategory. And one of the really nice things about having these locales is that since they're still all under the umbrella of Ask.CI, if you get a question on Ask.CI that is really very institution specific, we can redirect it to that institution just by changing a tag on the question. So you're not replicating or referring the question, you're actually just moving it to the subcategory. And similarly, if a user at one of these institutions posts a question that really would be of interest to the general community, we can also very easily switch a tag and move it into the mainstream of questions. And so this becomes a very powerful way to extend what Ask.CI is doing. So it's providing very institution-specific or situation-specific answers when they're needed, but also able to get these very general topics out there. So we've been experimenting with these 5 institutions, and actually have added have quite a few others that are currently under development that we will roll out when they're ready. So my next slide is about what we actually are doing right now to maintain the site. We're really we've made a lot of progress, but we haven't really quite reached what we call escape velocity, where it kind of takes care of itself. So right now we have a weekly meeting of our moderators. It's a really dedicated team of people from across the country. There's folks from Berkeley, Boston University, Mines, Harvard, MGHPCC, of course, Stanford, and a couple of independent consultants. We have drop-ins from our Locale moderators. And we basically have this meeting every week where we look at the site, look at new content that has been posted, make sure that we can find people to answer questions if they haven't been answered organically. We also choose a question of the week that we then post. Currently, we post it just to Campus Champions, but we're looking for other lists that we could post the question of the week to, where, again, we're trying to find that deep expertise that might be very far-flung. And then we also, every Friday, post something called a Friday Factoid, where we have a couple of folks on our moderators teams that are just very good at finding historical, interesting, or sometimes very forward, like very, very current little factoids that have something to do with research computing and are just generally very interesting. So we try and post those every Friday afternoon just for a little bit light reading at the end of the week. And so this is a call that happens every week. And then we are continuing to look for ways to reach other communities of interest. So one way is through the locales. Another way is if we have a topic which is very domain specific and there's another very specialized community of experts, we'll try and cross-post or cross-tweet to those communities as well. All of these just are ways that we're trying to expand the reach of our community. And of course, that's part of why I'm here as well today. And also just make people aware of this resource, because the stronger and the more participation we have from a more diverse community, the more powerful this resource can become for all of us. So let me see again if I can get onto Zoom. Let me just take a pause. And it looks like I'm back. So let me leave from my phone.
All right, we're able to see that, Julie. You may be muted, though. If you're saying something, we can't hear you, Julie.
Okay, hold on.
There we go. I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm just trying to find the unmute. Oh, did you unmute me from your end? Because I couldn't find it. Okay, great. All right, so now you're looking at the site. Sorry, so previously what I asked, and I guess I asked it to thin air, was are there any questions so far? Otherwise, I would like to show you guys a couple of things from the site. And first, I'm going to log out so that you can see what it looks like when you just come to the site. But are there any questions so far? Okay, so this is when you go to Ask.CI or Ask.Cyberinfrastructure.org, you'll land at this page. So there's a welcome banner that tells you a few things. One, what the question of the week is this week. And also, there is a link to our weekly moderators meeting that you're welcome to join at any time. And you can also, we also have a new users orientation on the first Friday of every month. So if you click on the learn more, that's the page that you'll go to. But as you can see, it looks somewhat Stack Exchange-esque. There's topics, there are tags. As I mentioned earlier, we have a discussion zone. Those are for questions that are more open-ended. And then we have Q&A, where these are for questions that are expected to have one answer. And as I was talking about earlier, we also have these locales. And so if you just look at the locales that we have right now, we could, for example, go take a look at the Mines site. And so Colorado Mines has a few questions that come up. She also has some examples that she wanted to share with her, with their community. Then if you go look at Brown, they've actually integrated this onto their new research computing site. And so they have a very seamless approach that they are trying to build for what goes here versus what goes on their internal site. And then another category that I really wanted to draw some attention to is the research stock community, which I talked about earlier. So we have institution-specific locales, or they were previously called sandboxes, and sometimes you'll still hear me refer to that. But we moved away from that because it's a sandbox in that the owner of this can use it as a place to try new things with using a discourse and a public platform for their community. But the way that it's managed and the way that the site is maintained is not a sandbox. So we didn't want to give the users the feeling that this is something that is not stable. And so that's why we started calling them locales. But you'll see sometimes in the literature that it's still referred to as both. But research stock is really interesting because this is a group that it's a community of interest, and they are geographically distributed and don't really necessarily have a place where you would have the group to support this physically, and having this the ability to create a board under the Ask.CI umbrella was really convenient for them, rather than for them to try and figure out how to build their own discourse site. And it's really become quite active. So we're really excited about all of these locales. It's really still a pilot for us to see what's working and what's not. And this is something that we'll be talking about quite a bit at our BOF, which is next Monday at PERC, if any of you happen to be there. So I'm going to go back, unless anybody wants to see anything else on the site, I'm going to go back to my presentation. And I will share this with Jason so that if anybody wants to see the slides that I was talking from that you couldn't see earlier, you'll be able to. But there's just a few last comments. First, how to participate. You just go to Ask.CI or Ask.CyberInfrastructureorg. They both take you to the same place. We would really encourage people to sign up and ask or answer a question either, and vote. As I said earlier in the talk, voting is how we ensure that the content stays fresh. So if there's a question that has 20 answers, it's really helpful for the community to just start rendering an opinion about what was the most helpful answer to them, so that the first answer that you see when you ask a question is likely to be one that will be helpful to you. We also have a Slack channel that is quite active, often talking about our questions of the week and our Friday factoids. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Zoom conference call every Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern time, where we talk about the site. And of course, the other way you can participate if you're interested, either from an institution perspective or a community of practice, is to create a locale on the site. And since this is a process that we're piloting right now, it's the time it takes to bring up a board is very quick. It's usually less than a couple of hours. And then we just ask people to have at least 5 questions ready, posted, 3 of them with answers, and also have a moderator that's able to join our call on Fridays. And then we can make the locale public. So if you already have 5 questions ready to go, you can have your locale up and ready within a few hours of when you make the request to us. So that's everything that I had formally prepared. As I said, we have a BOF at PERC next Monday from 5:15 to 6:15 in the Atlanta conference room. If any of you are at PERC, would love to see you there and get your feedback. And we also hope to add some new locales to the pilot at the BOF. And also, if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me. My email's on the slide. that was everything that I had prepared formally. Sorry about the technical difficulties in the middle of the talk. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts?
So thank you for going over that, Julie. Really interesting stuff. I've jotted down a couple questions, but certainly if anybody has any, and if you're in a quiet area and you want to ask them verbally, go for it, or just type them in the chat room and I'll repeat them. So I guess the first one that I had is, does any line of questioning or any series of conversations from the site, based on your memory, anything that was either surprising or sparked some good conversation or led to some process changes, anything that you could sort of relay just based on your experiences in watching and operating this for the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think the whole thing has been a learning process. Certainly there have been questions that come up. Every week we review topics, first anything that's new that's been posted, but also topics that haven't been answered, that have 0 replies. And we try to reach out to communities that might have specific boards, like a Reddit board or something very specific to that subject matter. Or in a case where we know that there's an expert somewhere in the community and one of the moderators knows that person, we will reach out to them. So it's kind of an ongoing process. I think that when we decided to start posting our questions of the week, that ended up being very interesting in terms of the getting more engagement and getting people to come back to the site. A lot of what we've been learning is just different ways to remind people that there's content here, and that we would love to get their involvement or their expertise posted on the site. As I said early in the conversation, this can be a really powerful resource if people are willing to take the time to share what they know. And the biggest challenge that people in this community in particular seem to have is that everybody just has so many questions coming at them from so many different places. And it's one of these things where if you can make the investment to post content further down the road, it will might not help you, but it'll help somebody else. And hopefully as the community pays it forward, that will create a really strong and powerful resource for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Oxenford, go ahead.
Thanks, Jason. Julie, this is great. Thanks for the update. It's really wonderful to see how it's evolved, and I really appreciate your sharing the information. I'm particularly excited about the research SOC being added as a locale. I think that's fantastic. I'm curious, and I think you just kind of hit on this a little bit, but I would think that there would be more locales created, and especially given the relatively low barrier to entry to creating one, like you just laid out, 5 questions, 3 of them answered, and a commitment to, having a moderator that attends the meetings. What do you think the reason is that you don't have were you expecting more locales to be created by now? Do you have a sense of why that is, or?
Actually, I would say that locales were one of the biggest surprises that we had on the site in a positive direction. It was something that grew organically. One of our moderators, Vanessa Sockett from Stanford, just thought of it one day, and she said, I think it would be really interesting to see if we could, integrate this more directly into the support for the Sherlock cluster at Stanford. And so she just kind of put it up overnight, one day, because she's this amazing coder. And then we realized that this was actually something that we wanted to do more of. And so we quickly added the folks that come to our regular moderators calls. Almost everybody created a locale. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, it's mostly word of mouth, getting the word out there that this is an opportunity. And so having opportunities like this to talk to this community, which is a little bit different than other talks that I've given, is great because it helps us spread the word. So currently we have, I think I have at least 8 other locales that are under development. And even though it seems like it's a low barrier to entry, I think, we do ask people to commit to having a moderator that will be able to answer the questions quickly and be able to come to our calls at least once a month. We don't expect them to come to every call, but we do expect them to come at least once a month. And for many groups, even groups at pretty large institutions, everyone is so swamped that they, I think they don't want to say that they will have that person and then not show up. And so they generally are very respectful about wanting to make sure that they have somebody that has the bandwidth available before they commit. But I do think that it's something that we certainly welcome more locales. We kind of limited ourselves to 15 for the first year, so we have we have room for more right now. Just while we're learning to see if there are any unexpected barriers to adding more. But so far, Discourse has been able to support everything that we've been trying to do. So it's really more a word of mouth question. It's kind of a long answer, but hopefully that answers the question. We would appreciate any help that anybody can provide to encouraging other institutions to create new locales, because it is a way to reach other communities that might benefit from having Ask.CI.
Great, thank you.
All right, I haven't seen any more questions come in, but if anybody does, please go ahead and jump in, and I'll thank you again, Julie, for giving this talk. Just go ahead and send me the slides after, and I'll make sure that this gets posted along with the recording.
Happy to do that. Oh, I see one of our moderators joined the call. Tori, hi, thank you for joining today. And thank you all again for the opportunity, and we will look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at the box next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. And for those that are going to be at PERC, safe travels. And we will talk to everybody again, not next week, but I believe the week after. And I'm trying to remember on the talk name. I believe it is Wallace Chase from Rayanne's. And he is going to be talking a little bit about their network, which is located in New Zealand. So have a good weekend, and we'll talk to everybody soon.